Hello, I'm Anthony Rader, and welcome to Politically Unhinged. This is our first episode of this podcast. What this podcast is about is the social aspects of conservatism. But when I have guests, such as some political figures, we're going to see what's on the other side of that person. Also, I will have guests such as my friends, and we won't be getting into political topics with them because they also have a big following. So, the topic that I want to talk about today is that you should never agree 100% with the politician. Because if you agree 100% with the politician, something is wrong. So, let's talk about it. And I think every single politician would necessarily agree with me, especially ones that have brain cells. And this is coming from someone that's gonna end up running for political office. So if you will eventually see my name on the ballot. So keep that in mind. So we gotta understand that agreeing with a politician 100% is a bad thing. Look, my favorite senator is Senator Rand Paul. I'd love to have him on the show sometime. But there are even things that I disagree with him about. There's never a reason why you should agree with a politician 100%. I mean, you don't agree with your parents 100%. You don't agree with your siblings 100% of the time. By the time we get older, we realize that our world is different. And this is coming from a 24-year-old. Now, we need to understand that ever since we were kids, our teachers and our parents said, what if you walk a mile in that person's shoes? Now, if you're a kid, you probably took it literally and went like, well, their shoes don't breathe well. My feet are going to smell more. But we need to understand that what we are is that even if we walk a mile in someone's shoes and have empathy with them, we are not going to make the same choices as them. Because we are not that person. Our being is what makes us different from everyone else. Our decision making. We need to understand that we are not like any other human being. People say that not one snowflake is the same. Well, not one person is the same either. We all have different upbringings, even your siblings, let's be honest, all right? Because the way that your siblings were raised and you were raised are slightly different. You're all raised different ways. You may have the same parents, but even parents decide and adapt on their parenting style. This is why we should also understand that even from a young age, we can never walk a mile in someone's shoes. Alright? So, how does this get into politics? Well, how we vote is actually based on our upbringing, especially while we are younger. If you look at people that are younger think emotionally. And people that are older typically think logically. Alright, so when people go like, well, these people are snowflakes, these people are know-it-alls. It's true in a sense, alright? Young people think emotionally because they are more attracted to their emotions. Older people think logically because they are thinking of the future generation or generations. And at age 24, I tell you that the older people are right. We have to be thinking 3 generations ahead. The reason why I say 3 generations ahead is because in sports, they always say that you need to be 3 steps ahead of your opponent. Typically, it's 2 steps, but let's say 3. All right? I always say you have to be looking out for the next 3 generations. Because if you think about the next generation, you're not really going to see any results. But if you think ahead 3 generations, you are going to see that your impact in life is going to be much more substantial. We think 30 generations ahead, we are going to be leaving this country and world better for our great-grandchildren and our grandchildren. We have to understand that where we are standing today is not the end. And this is what politicians tend to do. They tend to point fingers and say that this person is to blame for this person is blamed for that. This is what is going on with the House, Speaker vote. Kevin McCarthy cannot get 218 votes. That's because the Speaker of the House is based off of a majority. You need 50% of the vote plus one person to become Speaker of the House. And it's not a plurality. People argue that all of our stuff should be based on a plurality of the vote. But that's not necessarily true. People say that Georgia having a runoff election is not how we should be doing things. They should have a plurality agreement. Well, if we have that, but people also don't understand that your plurality and your runoff basically work the same. There are sometimes that things might flip. There's always an exception to every rule. Because you can never be 100% sure of yourself. Alright? And that's just math. We got to understand that. As young people, we do not understand that you can't be full of yourself. Young people go ahead and they think about them. Young people think more of like, oh my God, is the planet going to be okay? Are the puppies going to be okay? Young people think with feeling. They're emotional. And as they get older, they become more logical. That's the thing, is that like when you're getting raised by your parents and like you got all these hormones going, you are going emotionally with everything. That's how it is. But we got to understand that as we get older, it's logic. And here's the thing that men and women tend to separate. Is that, so women tend to think emotionally, men think logically. Right? There are a lot of women that say that they will never vote for a woman president because women are emotional. But yet again, there is an exception to every rule. And I cannot stress that enough. These exceptions mean that you can't be 100% sure of anything. Now, I have a plan for eventually when I'm elected into Congress that I will be pitching my bill, cutting everything basically, and giving us a surplus or just a balanced budget. But there is something that I cannot go ahead and say, yes, this will definitely do that, because you can never be 100% sure of yourself. And so people are like, well, where does this come from? Well, you'll say you can never agree with a politician 100%. Well, it's because, look, we are not the same. All right? I cannot go up to a politician and automatically know what their stance is on everything. You cannot go up to me and know what my stance is on everything as well. Look, I'm an originalist, all right? But I understand that the country has exceptions. And I accept that, all right? The reason why the world works as it is that everyone is different. And we got to understand that. But as Americans, we have lost our way. We think that everyone thinks like us, and that has become from mass media. It's come from the government interfering. It's come from the government going all like to Twitter, released by the Twitter files, saying that, well, you got to stop this, you got to stop that from happening. I mean, we got to understand this, all right? But, like I said, there's always an exception to every rule, all right? People say that the government has their best interest at heart for the American people. But I'm going to take this quote from Dennis Prager that people are inherently evil. That goes with governments. And Dennis Prager is a very, very smart man, and I think it's unfortunate that he didn't run for political office. I think if he ran for political office, he would be one of the most successful people in the political realm. But I understand that he doesn't want to do that. So Dennis Prager says that people are inherently evil because we got to teach children what's right. I mean, look at every toddler, for example. Or a baby. So these toddlers and babies are kicking and screaming on an airplane, and they're kicking the seat in front of them. That's because they don't know what's right and wrong. Right and wrong. They don't know what's necessarily acceptable. As children, we didn't know that. We had to learn that from our parents. And even our parents knew that they have to teach it in different ways. For instance, I was deaf as a child, and my mother either signed to me or told me read her lips by basically smacking herself on the chin. I found this out recently that she hit herself on the chin, so I knew to look at her lips to understand what she was saying. And we got to understand that our upbringings make us who we are. And just by citing everything, we got to understand that everyone has a piece of this world. Well, there are people that people like to call non-playable characters or NPCs because they do not think the way that they do. Thing is that we haven't experienced their lives. All right? And just because I have a similar situation to them doesn't mean I'm going to understand where they come from. That's not the case. I look at life as a beautiful thing, all right? I believe that every child has a place here. I don't think abortion should be allowed. But there are exceptions that I say, and that is rape and incest. And I think a lot of people can agree that's acceptable. I also think that the thing is that I don't think that you should be killing a child. But I understand that there are people that disagree with me. Hell, you might disagree with many of my takes in this podcast. But who cares, all right? We don't live the same life. And that's the problem, all right? We got so full of ourselves in the last 20-some years that the American people just think their own way. We saw this with Donald Trump. Donald Trump, as much as I liked him as president, his biggest weakness is himself. He's full of himself, all right? It's a great thing that he says that it's basically my way or the highway, but that is also his biggest weakness. Trump is stubborn. That's good to have a leader, but at the same time, it's not good to have. It is his biggest weakness. We got to understand that people back then don't think the way that people think now. Now, there are people that say yes, people that think that they are a certain thing should be able to go into the bathroom that they are not actually supposed to go in. I'm talking about, do you know what's the transgenders? Personally, I don't think that if you have an XY, you go in the men's. If you are XX, you go in the women's. But you may disagree with me, but listen, I'm a politician, so it's all right for you to disagree with me. That being said, so we got to understand that there is an exception to every rule. And going back to our emotional and logical presence, there's something significant with the two genders. And that is, women think emotionally and men think logically. They complement each other. Women think emotionally, and that helps the man because men aren't necessarily intact with their feelings. Women are. Women have more empathy than men do. And men think more logically than women. And that's how it's been. But like I said, there is an exception to every single rule. Joe Biden says that the Second Amendment isn't absolute. But if you read it, it says shall not be infringed. What does shall not be infringed mean? Means that you should not be making a law upon this amendment. The only way for them to change anything that's written in the Constitution is by amending it. That's why alcohol was banned for a certain amount of time in our history. There's prohibition. It happened once before. It could happen again. History repeats itself if we do not learn from it. But some politicians say it's a good thing that we don't learn from history. And that is because they want us at that same pathway, that same length to control us like they did back then. And it pains me to say this, but we're doing it again. Ourselves as the American people do not understand that we need to go ahead and think for ourselves. That means turning off the TV, getting off of social media, turning off these different takes that many people have. And it's very, very important to just think that way. Even if it's just one day out of the year, you're going to think a different way. And that's very important. We go through life and going ahead and do what people say to do. We do this at work all the time. Do we question our bosses? Yes, we do, but we go ahead and do that work anyway. But we got to understand that a lot of this stuff, there is a time and place for this. If you have a disagreement with someone, you got to go ahead and say it. You can't go ahead and go like, well, I disagree with you. This isn't the case. Our founding fathers founded this country on the idea that all of us can have different beliefs and we can discuss it. Besides yelling racist, bigot, or any other estranged names. I have friends that align themselves with a different political party. Hell, even third parties. But it's a good thing that we have these discussions. But now we have become so enclosed in ourselves with social media, and this has actually ruined our humanity. Because just typing things on this screen has made us think that we are so invincible and that we do not need to go ahead and say like, well, I don't need your premise. I disagree with you, so you're a racist. Well, if you do that to someone's face, well, you won't. Let's be honest. If I go up to you and say that I think guns should be allowed everywhere, you're not going to go up to me and say, you're a racist, you're a bigot. You're not going to. You and I are going to have a discussion why I think that way. And that's how it is. It is. But we've become entrenched in all these social aspects in the last 20 years. It's a fairly new thing. Let's be honest, social media is very new. The internet is very new. We are dealing with things that humanity never has dealt with. If you believe what they tell you, But there was a time in this country where we were more unified. I say this looking at the 70s and 80s. I think there was a turning point in the 2000s. Not necessarily when Bush got elected for his second term. I think the turning point was after that. And I can't pinpoint it exactly, but people say it was because of Barack Obama. People say that it was because of a certain politician. I'm not quite sure about that. I think it's because that we all let the media rule our lives, thus making us agree with some politicians more than often. Yes, we vote our politicians to represent us. We vote in our politicians to lead us. But is there a time that we need to look in the mirror and go like, well, I don't necessarily agree with this politician. Why did I vote for this person? Look, it's a good thing if you don't agree with these guys. They're people. We're not supposed to agree with everyone. Hell, my best friend since elementary school, him and I even have these discussions, and we don't agree on everything. That's what makes us human. We have different upbringings. We have different value systems. Even the politicians do. We like to say that everyone values their family first, but that's not the case. Not everyone values their family first. And we gotta accept that. People say that everyone values their family, but no, not necessarily. There are people that think their family is deliberate assholes and don't want to speak to them ever again. There are people that really value their family and talk to them all the time. But we need to accept that there are different upbringings, there are different viewpoints, and as an American people, we forgot that. We do not believe that we're supposed to have different opinions anymore. We do not believe that people should be thinking from themselves anymore. And it's very unfortunate. It is one of the worst things that could have happened to our civilization. And quite frankly, people say that the Founding Fathers wouldn't recognize America as it was today. Look, it's nearly been, let's see, it was a bicentennial in 1976, right? It has nearly been 250 years since the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Let's be honest. If we even took ourselves, let's say we can go back in time and dragged ourselves back to now, even 5 years ago, we wouldn't recognize this place either. That is extremely unfortunate. Yes, our Founding Fathers would have a permanent shock to what this country has become. But I think they would also be proud. The shock would come with our civil rights. The first 10 amendments, because Americans no longer really value them. That is where their shock would come from. James Madison, the original author of the Constitution, yeah, but a lot of you didn't know that one. James Madison was a very young man when he wrote the Constitution. But even people grew up faster by then. He wouldn't recognize the Constitution as it is now because we've amended it so many times. People like to quote Benjamin Franklin saying that we should be drawing up a Constitution every 10 years. James Madison didn't believe that. James Madison believed that since he is the author of the Second Amendment, people asked if they could have cannons. This is artillery. He said, fuck yeah, you could have cannons. People say, well, this isn't enough for us to support this fact. But to me, it is. I'm an originalist. But like I said, you're free to disagree with me. A politician even though I haven't started my political career. But I am, and I will be a politician. We are going to disagree on stuff, and that's okay. Disagreeing on the fundamentals is okay. Disagreeing on other things is okay. There are just times that we got to look ourselves in the mirror and say, there is something wrong, and I need to do something about it. But we do not get that anymore, and it's unfortunate. People do not look themselves in the mirror and go, well, like, what have I done? People do not think 3 generations ahead. And I think it's time for us as citizens, as people, to look 3 generations ahead. And this is why it is a bad thing to agree with politicians 100% of the time. Because if you agree with a politician 100% of the time, there is something wrong. Because we are not the same. Ever. All right. Well, I am going to leave you guys with a historical quote. Until next time. Make sure you like, subscribe. I'll see you. And our historical quote for this podcast is, to give anything less than your best is to sacrifice the gift. That is Steve Prefontaine, the greatest distance runner in American history. All right. Thank you, and God bless.